Greetings and welcome to this Roll for Crit video. I'm Will and today I'm going to return to the Mansions of Madness 2nd edition. If you don't know, I actually listed what was currently the available 13 scenarios in the game. The video will be down below, but there's a thumbnail over there. But a lot has come out then. We've had 3 expansions as well as a new DLC mission. So I thought I gotta add them back to the list to keep it up to date. Now, before we get started to the list, I want to quickly go over the themes of each expansion so you have a general idea of what's going on with them, because the expansions tend to follow a path. So first off, we've got the Sanctum of Twilight, and in that one you are sort of invading the Silver Twilight, sort of the cult group that tends to be in a lot of the Arkham file games that are... they're bad, but they tend to be not as bad as whatever you're usually fighting. This case though, they are the focus. This is actually the smallest of the expansions with only 2 scenarios in there and not as much added content. It also comes with these little restraint tiles, which is a new way that may or may not pop up for you to help fight off some monsters. Next, we got Horrific Journeys. As you can see, this long path here, this one's all about journeying. I have the train set up here because I happen to like the train setup idea. There's actually railways and a bunch of new monsters. There's also boat pieces as well as an airship sort of Zeppelin-like pieces as well. This comes with 3 expansions like most of the others, and we'll get to more about those a little bit later. Finally, the newest one, Path of the Serpent, will have you head out into the jungle and try to enter secret temples or find out what happened to lost expeditions. This one is really based around the elder god Yig and his sort of serpent people, as well as maybe just snakes in general. So if you are terrified of snakes, you may want to avoid this one. Other than that, you can dive right into this jungle. Now that last thing, the new DLC mission, as of this video, all the DLCs really only require the core to function. So it really isn't worthwhile to talk about what that's added until I actually go through the specifics of that. Now without further ado, let's actually add these to the list. At 22, we actually have a new scenario, Hidden Depths from the Horrific Journeys expansion. This is a scenario that takes place on a boat where something's happened to the engine and you realize that not everyone is who they may seem to be. Not only are some of the NPCs maybe deep ones, these little nice figures here who come off the base on these loose base, but some of your companions will be. You will hand out cards. Well, that will tell you if you are a hidden one or not. Then the app will ask, are you a hidden one? And the reason I ask that is because you'll have to make some decisions. It'll tell you which NPCs are on your side so you can try to make sure they don't get kicked off, because the goal of the humans is to get as many humans on the life raft and try to get all the deep ones off the boat. They can overpower some of them, but if too many make it on, the deep ones will win. Of course, the deep ones don't care. They'll just try to kill you. And honestly, this trader mechanic fell flat for me. The hidden trader mechanic I felt like was tacked into this game, and because it was tacked in and not built around it, I felt like it didn't work at all. Yes, you could argue that there are hidden traders before with, if you go mad so far, you may get that. But to me, that's sort of just a pushing the limits when you're near the end of the campaign. The entire game is not built around traders. And what would happen is, one, the game just didn't work for us. You just kept dying as the humans. But the traders themselves actually weren't having fun. Our one trader, who ironically seems to always be the trader in whatever game we play, kept getting the phone saying, pass the phone to this player and secretly read this message. And when you know, happens 2 or 3 times, you're like, why does the phone keep asking you questions? And pretty much we didn't trust him for the rest of the game. So even though he won, we were pretty much just like, we're gonna tie you up when we can, because there are some items to restrain people. But overall, it just felt like a really big slog. And I just really don't think that adding a hidden trader mechanic into a Mansions of Madness scenario is the way to go. I think coming up with an interesting story is, and I won't lie, this is a good idea. The idea of having people on a vessel that is stranded and trying to make its way home, while there are people who look like they're on your side but really are secretly something else. And they will secretly try to sabotage you, and even if you find out about them, they may be able to still mess with you. Unfortunately, Fantasy Flight doesn't seem to have a trader game that has these similar mechanics and ideas that it could use to reskin this on top of. Too bad. So at 21, we have Escape from Innsmouth. That's actually from the core set. And pretty much I'll say a quick brief, just the place and the name of older sets. I really want to focus on the newer stuff that came out. Yes, I know it was extremely popular, but for me it didn't do that well. And I also think a lot of the core ones tend to do a little bit better on people's lists because more people have played them. You can let me know how wrong I am on that. Next up though, we are going to visit the Silver Twilight Lodge from the Sanctum of Twilight. This scenario was titled Behind Closed Doors. In this scenario, you have been kidnapped, and it turns out you were planning to be sacrificed to give power to one of the cult members because they're planning pretty much a coup d'etat, and you've just been caught in the middle of it, and you don't want to be part of it. So you are trying to escape with some fellow other prisoners, or sacrifices? I'm not sure what the word would be there. Anyways, you were trying to escape. And at first, it seemed to hint to me that there was going to be a traitor amongst that you need to find out, like some puzzle solving, but that really didn't turn out to be an important thing. It also wasn't like something like the gangs of Arkham, which I still wasn't as hot about, but like where you could talk and try to deal with each side. It was pretty much just trying to make your way through, find enough clues to solve the locks and get out of there, which if you don't, then pretty much a whole bunch of monsters spawn on you, and if you don't beat the monsters in time, then the original head of the Silver Twilight will show up and say, why should I waste some perfectly good sacrifices? So to me, it was a bit of a disappointment, I guess is why it's ranking so low for me. So next on the list was Gangs of Arkham from Streets of Arkham at 19, and we keep moving on up with Cycle of Eternity, Cult of Sentinel Hill, and Dearly Departed. But we have now hit 15, in which we now will hit one from the Path of the Serpent expansion. This scenario was titled Into the Dark. In this scenario, you were invited on an expedition, but you arrived a little bit late. When you arrive, you find out that the entire camp was decimated, and as far as you know, the only notes you have is that when the sun was setting, they made sure that torches were lit and there was no darkness in camp. And you're like, what's going on? You will soon discover that they were all killed by this guy here. A giant snake had attacked them all, and apparently it was afraid of fire. Your goal now is to actually explore with what few torches you have before they all go out and you have to fight this snake. Your goal is to try to find maybe more hints from other notes from the previous expedition, find out if he has some weak sides, if he's blind in a certain eye, and by finding out these things, at the very end, once all the torches go out, you will fight this monster. Unlike in the other scenarios where usually carrying a light source only goes out when they say, are you carrying a light source? Great, you've just lit the entire room on fire. This will say something like, who has the lowest sanity? And that person's torch will just go out. You won't light things on fire. It's in the rainforest and pretty wet, so the fire will not be a big issue for you in terms of hurting you. And you will just have pretty much on a timer. And you're gonna try to run around to find all these things until you have this big boss battle. This is a very combat heavy one. To me, the reason why I've put it down at 15 is because while I did like this idea of trying to solve the puzzles, and especially if I thought it was a bit more interesting in combat, because if you find those clues, what it isn't just a bonus. One would be if you light it on fire this turn, deal 2 extra damage. If you are attacking, if you found out it's blind in one eye, you now can attack it and roll an extra die or something. There's a bit more complexity to it, but in the end, it didn't feel really Lovecraft to me. I guess, yeah, snakes are scary to some people, but it felt more like the Anaconda movie than, Mansions of Madness, Eldritch horror kind of deal. So good mechanic-wise, just not really that Lovecraft flair I'm looking for. Astral Alchemy from the Streets of Arkham is next at 14, but 13, we're now on the original scary number. We are going to the other Sanctum of Twilight expansion, this one titled The Twilight Diadem. I think I'm mispronouncing that. It's a crown. Anyways, in Arkham every year there is a festival that is supported by the Twilight Lodge where they run a little parade and they have floats going through the city and they name a king and queen. The queen this year tells you that she's in danger and she thinks she's going to be sacrificed for some reason. So it's up to you to find out what's going on. This one is pretty solid. You actually have different ways to save the day, so to speak, and help out. It's very interesting how they use that. This is where you see more of these wraith creatures that they introduced there, which was interesting. And I did like the fact because at first there was a little bit of disappointment. I was trying to find something and I thought I was about to get it, but then some cultists, I guess I should say, snatched it up really quickly. But it turns out I still had another way around it, so that helps a lot. But Other than that, the board did change a bit if you had other expansions, so it was a little bit better, but still it was for the most part linear-ish. There wasn't really too many puzzle solving outside the small puzzles they have of rearranging a picture or something. So an all right way to end off the Sanctum of Twilight, but probably not one of my favorite expansions. Next two actually are the rest of the Horrific Journeys expansions. At 12, we have the Murder on the Stargaze Majestic. This is a murder mystery, and of course, you're trying to find out the murderer before it's too late. This one will shift murderers between each playthrough, so it won't always be the same person, which is very nice. However, to try to make everyone seem suspicious, a lot of people have either ties to being a cultist or used to be a cultist or something like that, and those don't change, so it was really annoying to read these things at first and be like, oh my god, this person's gotta be the bad guy, that's the hint. Like, no, that's just the backstory you gave everyone everyone seems to have a dark side. And while there are clues there to be like where the blood trail leads or the blood trail is in a heel shoe or something like that, I really wish they worked a little bit better on the stories part 2, because to me that just felt like a annoying red herring, I guess, and a little lazy there. So that's why I wasn't nearly as excited about this one. The next one at 11 though was the 1050 to Arkham. And I 100% admit, I'm a little biased here. I like the idea of being on a train. I don't know why. It just really cool. I loved it in the Arkham card game, and this one I thought was fun too. You are on a train and a lot of weird stuff's going on. People are disappearing. And another cool thing is there's actually a train station piece. You will stop at this sort of haunted train station to gather some stuff, but the train might start moving. And if you don't hop on time, you have to try to catch it, and you can't. You just sort of, bad things can happen. And you may have to, without saying too much why, detach train cars, in which you actually will flip over to rail spots where you may have to hop from car to car if you weren't on the locomotive half of the train, or maybe you just get pulled back. And the whole idea was really fun and cool. That was a bit more fun because there's a lot more moving around with the pieces, I think, and that's what made it really interesting. At 10, we have Dark Reflections, which is a DLC mission, and following my preview list, we actually go all the way up to at 6, where now Rising Tides resides from the core, and at 5, that's right, we're now in the top 5, we have a one from the Path of the Serpent, this one titled Lost Temple of Yig. This one, you will enter a temple because there is a ritual going on to try to summon Yig to this plane. Not good news. However, to protect themselves and make sure the ritual is complete, they have locked themselves behind a special door, which will only open if you complete multiple tasks in this sort of gauntlet challenge of the temple. It's pretty much the Legends of the Hidden Temple, which is really fun. And each room has this weird little puzzle thing. It's sort of small, but each one's different. And some of them were actually really clever and I had a lot of fun with. There was also building of a silver statue, so that's awesome. This was like that. This is what you actually want from the mansions involving this temple thing. You know, you're actually in a temple, you're in a building. It's just a very ancient one, not an old house. This one's a lot of fun and probably, I guess the other one also has a bit of flair, but I think it's the most directly, obviously, like this one mentions Yig a lot more to me and is more about that compared to the other Path of the Serpent one. So it's got some points there also for a bit more of the actual mythos feeling to it. At 4, we have Shatter Bonds, also from the core. And I've yet to mention 2 of the new scenarios. So that means of the top 3, 2 of them are new. So that should be good news. At 3, we do have the DLC mission, Altered Fates. In this one, you will actually have to split up your team because one part of your team will jump through a portal and they will end in a similar house, but in the distant future. So you will actually be going back and forth, moving around the house, maybe even passing items and sort of hiding them in spots for the future selves to find and use. And you can find all these hints that refer back to each room. It was a really fun theme. It was really great. I had a lot of fun with it. It's what I'd like to see with this whole split room idea. Also, it's DLC, so you only need the core. But at number 2 and 1, we do have the ill-fated expansion from the Streets of Arkham, as well as the last one from the Path of the Serpent. Now, which one is 2 and 1? Number 2, we have The Jungle Awakens from the Path of the Serpent. In this expansion, you were invited to a party where your friend has come back from an expedition with a bunch of relics. And turns out his house turns into a jungle and everything's going terrible. In this, you have to find those statues and bring them back to this altar and arrange them in a specific order. You're actually going to have to find clues around the board, such as the jaguar cannot be next to the crocodile, and the crocodile always goes last, and clues like that. It's very similar to the illustrated expansion where you're going to find a bunch of these clues and have to learn to rearrange them together. I honestly put it at number 2 because it is a bit simpler. That might be better for you. I really just think the ill-fated, because it's a bit more complex, will add a bit more playability to it and without being too hard to solve. But another small thing was that there's actually, people are slowly turning to snakes, but if you can get the statues to them in time, they'll actually sort of revert back, giving you more time there. I thought that was a really cool and interesting mechanic. And also, keeping on with these movie references, this one is Jumanji, because it's a house turning into a jungle, so who doesn't love that? But unfortunately, you only get flying serpents instead of rhinos, lions, and zebras. So that's my list. I'm going to have the full list over here so you can take a look, making sure that you know exactly where things place so you can yell at me correctly in the comment section. And overall, you know, a lot of them are pretty fun. Outside of that one horrific journeys where I really don't like that trader mechanic, I thought most of them probably fine to play with. By the way, if you are going to bring up the fact that I don't like trader mechanics and that's why I put at the bottom, you are right on that fact. But the people I played with are huge fans of trader mechanics and they just found that really lacking. I mean, Jonathan has Battlestar Galactica in his top 10 and I know that's one of the few games that will never leave that list. So I just think it was a poor implementation of it. Another thing, doing this list, I think more so, I mentioned this obviously in my previous list, but it really shines about the biggest weakness to Mansions of Madness. And that's that these expansions are all standalone. And that's great if you're maybe new, but because the DLC, they don't add like, oh, we've made some interesting mixed DLCs or something. The mechanics and stuff or pieces are never going to be seen again, meaning that it's almost like a one-time buy and you're done. Like, for example, all 3 of these, I always forget about these restraint chips. They come with these new mechanic chips, the restraint chips from the Twilight one. You got water one that slow you down, these weird dimensional rifts from the horrific journeys, as well as rubble and overgrowth from the Path of the Serpent. These add some really interesting mechanics, especially some items in there that deal with them. And you could easily use these to make sense in the other scenarios, even no matter where you are. So like even the flooding, you don't have to be on a ship. There's a flooded basement or something. A house could be overgrown or have rubble because a building collapsed. I mean, all these weird mechanics I think could make for some fun, new, interesting scenarios. But because as of now, all the DLCs only require the core, which I guess makes sense at the time. I think at this point with all the expansions, you could sort of expect people to maybe own an expansion or 2. It means that you're never going to use them again, and that's really disappointing. I mean, yes, it is true. I mentioned it before. There's the Valkyrie system, which are the unofficial fan-made scenarios. You know, God bless them, because there's going to be a lot more interesting stuff that really mixes this stuff together. But I really think Fantasy Flight should take a look at these mechanics and either try to make DLCs that actually, all right, so it's a DLC, but you will need the Horrific Journeys and the Sanctum of Twilight expansion, something like that. Because there is plenty more potential that you could do with a lot of these boards, monsters, and pieces. You just gotta put it out there. Or at the very least, if you don't want to put in that work yourselves, do a Mario Maker system. I mean, Mario Maker is very popular and successful. This could easily have something like that. Yes, you will have levels that are nearly impossible. Maybe someone will make an auto build level, just like some of those auto run Mario Maker levels. But I mean, I do think there's a lot that Mansion Madness could do if you allowed them the pieces to really mix up. But if you are new to it, that means that you can just buy whichever one sounds interesting. You don't have to worry about having them in the right order. If you want to go into the jungle, just buy the Path of the Serpent first. If you want to take the journeys, buy Horrific Journeys first. You know, buy what's interest to you. If you have played them before, let me know what your thoughts are on all these expansions now below. Is this list just completely idiotic? Am I completely wrong? The order should even be just mirrored or flipped? Or am I pretty close to what your list would be? Let me know what your thoughts are down below. And in particular, I would love to hear what your top 3 are in terms of the top scenarios. Until then, thank you so much for listening. I'm Will, and this has been Roll for Crit.
Support our Patreon, like this video, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a thing.
Watch more of our content now to hold back Cthulhu's madness.